welcome folks, Fearless Filmmaker event here.
Roll sound. Cameras rolling.
Hello, I'm Dan Orozco, and welcome to Butter City. Our guest today is Ali Selim. Ali's a critically acclaimed commercial director who went on to direct the feature film Sweetland. In the first part of a two-part show, we'll talk to Ali about his roots in commercials, short films, and Minnesota. Please welcome to the show, Ali Selim.
Thanks for having me.
Hey man, it's good to have you here.
Pleasure.
So just to kind of start with a little bit of history, let's talk about how you got in the film business. I mean, you started with commercials, but how did you even get into that?
I actually I think I got into the film business by picking up dog poop. I graduated from St. Thomas with a degree in English literature, and took a film course from George Politis, who was a theater instructor there, and I loved it, and it really kind of changed my perspective on things. And I went on to take some courses at Film in the Cities, which I think has become the program at MCTC now. Mm-hmm. And I was there one day, and somebody came and said, we need a production assistant to work on the Walter Mondale presidential campaign ads. And I was the only guy there, so I got the job for $75 a day. And we were shooting a picnic scene where Walter Mondale was talking to some senior citizens about what a wonderful thing program he was gonna have for senior citizens. And they were walking in a park, and they were walking up over a hill, and a Steadicam was leading them, and I saw that they were heading right for this pile of dog poop. And so I went out, picked it up behind the camera, and I disposed of it, and the producer saw that and thought, this guy has a future. That's an absolutely true story, and he wrote a letter of recommendation that referenced that act.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that shows anticipation.
I guess it shows a lot of things.
Yeah, it shows a lot of potential. That's kind of what we're all
Yeah.
doing at some levels, picking up.
And largely because of that, I started to get work. I mean, because he left word that I was a good production assistant who would pick up dog poop, and I got a lot of work in the business.
So it was kind of PAing, and then did you join the electric department, and then?
No, I PA'd for probably on and off for a year while I was still taking some classes and learning how to write. And then I was a location scout once, I think, and then I said, there's no corporate ladder here. If you want to direct, you direct. You don't work your way up. And I think there are a lot of people who have worked their way up, and they know a lot. They know a very different aspect of the film business than I do, and they can contribute as directors in a very different way than I can. But I felt like my contribution was going to come through my storytelling, and I wasn't going to hone my storytelling abilities in the electric department. Right. And so I sort of got out of working on commercials and tried to find a way to become a director, which I did. I also attended St. Thomas Academy for high school, and it was their centennial year, and they were still showing this film that they had made in 1958, I believe, called Manhood in the Making, which was a classic 50s industrial film with a voiceover and MOS images of clean-cut young boys in their uniforms. And I said, I don't know that I can contribute in money or contribute by recruiting for you, but I can definitely contribute by making a better film. And an alumnus heard that cry and wrote me a check for the amount of money it would take to make a film. And I turned around, took that check out, and hired really the best people in the local industry at the time. Greg Winter was the cinematographer on it, and I made a pretty good little film for St. Thomas.
Manhood in the Making Part 2?
No, it was called A Sense of Tradition for the Second Century. But it was really quite a good film that they continue to use today. And that sort of got me in as a director. And then people around town said, oh, let's hire him to produce or direct. So I really didn't have to work my way. Well, it's still working your way up.
But you just declared yourself as a director, and then there you are.
Which I think you have to do.
You've directed some other short films. Today, the short film we have is called Emperor of the Air. Can you talk about how you pulled that together and kind of how you got into it, how you found the story?
How or why?
Well, let's talk about why.
Yeah, well, the why is I had optioned the rights to A Gravestone Made of Wheat, which was published in 1990 and is ultimately what became my film Sweetland. And I think I was trying to figure out how to write a screenplay, and I was trying to figure out how to raise money for your first feature. And I thought if I go back into, if I go back and make a short that somehow resembles this, maybe I can use that short to raise the money. So I consciously went out looking for short stories that had a similar theme, an elderly gentleman looking back on his life and making some sense about a single point in his life. And I found Emperor of the Air, which I thought had spiritual similarities to A Gravestone Made of Wheat. So I snatched it up, and I made a film that I think it's largely flawed, and I'm glad that I made it that way, because I think it taught me a lot about what to do and what not to do when I had the opportunity to make Sweetland.
Cool. Let's take a look at the clip. Great.
A fireman near the flames had been asphyxiated, and the cone of the fire had turned abruptly and sucked all of the oxygen out of the air. My father explained to me how a flame breathed oxygen like a man. He was a pharmacist, and taken me to the fire out of curiosity. Anything scientific interested him. He kept tide tables and collected details of nature. He stored them in glass-fronted cases, which he leaned against the stone wall of our cellar.
Yeah, there you go.
He taught me constellations of the northern
My
hemisphere.
name's Rich. I knew all 1,200 by first name basis.
He showed me how to find Perseus, Boötes, and Andromeda, how some of the brightest stars illuminated Lyra and Aquila. How, though the constellations proceed with the seasons, Polaris remains most fixed and is thus the set point of a mariner's navigation. I find now that this is rare knowledge. Later, when I taught astronomy, my students rarely cared about the silicon and ion on the sun, but when I told them stories of Cephas and Lacerta, they were silent.
Large tree in the crook there, you see just beyond
At a
that?
party now, I can always find a drinking husband who will come outside with me and sip cognac while I tell him the story of Boötes, the celestial herdsman. He was the mythical inventor of the ox-drawn
So
plow.
I'll let your eye follow along the
Or that of Zeus, who fell in love with Callisto, one of the nymphs of Artemis, the chaste goddess of the hunt.
And then the next constellation is going to connect.
When I tell these stories, people are silent and attend my words. Climbing the elm was forbidden, but I felt I knew how to climb it anyway. I was an adventurous youth, as I was later an adventurous man. But all of my adventures had a quality about them of safety and planned success. When my father went upstairs that night, I made the leap. Climbed to the top and watched a world that was on two sides, orange and red with flame. Later that same night, the wind changed, and my father woke me as whole families gathered in the streets and evacuation plans were made.
Don't forget my clapper! Get in the car, son. You have everything?
I'm not going.
What do you mean you're not going?
I'm not going.
Of course you are going, sweetheart. This place.
This place is my home.
When my father came to the car, he was alone. Just as when we drove west that night and slept with the rest of our neighbors on army cots in the high school gym in the next town. We were alone. My mother stayed behind. Nothing important came of this. Later that night, the wind calmed and heavy rain put the fire out. I realize now that I inherited none of my mother's moral stubbornness. Though my thoughts engaged the certainty that I'd hoped to enjoy late in my life, my actions never seemed to. But the elm was ancient and exquisite. We could not let it die. The bark was now clear, I slept.
Very cool. So you said you made this as kind of a precursor, as kind of a way to examine and try to learn how to get money for Sweetland. Is that fair to say?
Well,
or
learn how to make a film.
Learn how to make a film.
Because if I could prove that I could make a film, I figured people would be throwing money at me to make Sweetland. And I think what succeeds in Emperor of the Air is largely the work of Mike Welkley, the cinematographer, Paul Bosing, the lead actor who has a beautiful voice. Mm-hmm. And I think the sound design work is very interesting and intricate. And so it's a pleasing experience for people, but as you and I were just saying while the clip was playing, it's almost all voiceover, which I think is a kind of a cop-out way of telling a story. And so I think, you know, in the eyes of Hollywood, this wasn't a hugely successful exercise.
But so did you get any of that? Were you able to use it to get funding? Was it the calling card you wanted, or did it?
You know, I have no regrets. It was a fantastic experience, and I personally learned a lot. I don't think it was a calling card, but I didn't feel like I'd failed for not having a calling card. I mean, there was 10 years between this and Sweetland, so I can hardly say that this led directly to Sweetland, but I do know that the experiences I had on this taught me a lot of what I used to make Sweetland successful.
And, you know, outside of Sweetland and Emperor of the Air, you're doing a lot of commercials, over 800 commercials. Those two films were adaptations, and we've talked about how I was saying that commercials are, like, in a way, adaptations. You've got so many people who've come to the table before you get there, before you get your hands on it. They kind of have this idea. They have it boarded out, even what they think it should look like. They give it to you. Do you feel compelled to make it your own, to put your stamp on it and say, this is an Ali Selim film in commercial form?
Yeah, I think most people do. Most people would want to put their stamp on it. I think everybody wants to matter. Everybody wants to have a purpose. I think everybody has an ego. And I think your idea about commercials being an adaptation or directors making commercials an adaptation, I think it's very interesting. But for me, I always felt like I was part of a team, you know, with the ad agency and the client that was just trying to make a very clear and concise and informative piece of advertising, as opposed to hijacking it and making it my own. I feel like my contribution was clear if the commercial succeeded. So, I mean, it's a tricky thing for me because I never really saw myself as this, you know, creative director who was going to
tour.
Yeah, no, tour, not in the commercial world. I mean, because it's not my story, you know. And like with the scripts I write and with Sweetland and even a little bit with Emperor of the Air, it's a story that I want to tell, so I'm gonna tell it, you know. And there's my mark there. But in advertising, you know, I don't think anybody would dispute me if I said we're all doing it to make a living. We're not doing it for expression, you know. We're doing it to make a living, and that's a responsible way of doing it. Is to say, all right, the ultimate goal here is to sell more product, or inform people that our hospital is bigger, better, more stuff than the other one, you know. And so the more we go to work saying that's what we're doing, I think the better we feel at the end of the day because we're honest about what we've done. So I rarely tried to put my Emperor of the Air Sweetland stamp on a commercial, and more said, what skills can I bring? What skills do I have that I can bring to this to make this a better piece of advertising?
And, you know, now that you have a feature film, you know, that's had some success and you've got some other stuff in the works, is there a desire to dabble back in commercials again, do you think? Do you think you'd want to go back into that?
You know, it's kind of all the same to me. It's kind of all storytelling and working with cameras and lights and actors, and so it's all very appealing. I think the advertising industry, and rightfully so, is kind of a fashion industry where they're constantly trying to create the new, as opposed to feature films, which I think are constantly trying to create the truthful, or, you know, explore the truthful. And so in constantly trying to create the new, you're always looking for the new, and, you know, I'm not new anymore. I mean, I suppose I could bring some wisdom to advertising. I could bring a lot of experience after 856 commercials. And I still do a few here and there for friends, and, you know, they're kind of effortless and they're pretty good. I mean, they succeed for what they're supposed to do. But I think at that level that I was playing, the New York ad agencies, I think I would have to expend a lot of energy to get back in and prove that even if I'm not new, I'm sort of resurrected. And I would rather put that energy into writing my next script or making my next film, which is gratifying in a different way.
Yes, yeah.
I can't pay my mortgage now, but I sure do. I express myself a lot.
We're going to show two commercials here. The first one was for a furniture ad. It was
Yeah, Furniture Maker Woodstock, which is a local company.
a local company. And the second one was for AIDS awareness.
AIDS awareness, one of the early ads before people even knew what the word AIDS meant.
Okay, let's take a look at these two clips right now.
I got mailman, don't see anywhere, pay my taxes. I'll do something about that. I don't know. Used to be different when you didn't do what you get women. No, we don't care. Nobody cares. Oh, yeah. Nice flower. Find out if she loves me. Yeah, over here. She loves me. Maybe she doesn't. Who knows? Right, the right number of petals on there anyway. You can go and come out. Sure.
If you care, send the chair.
She loves me.
1888, sit there. They'll send it.
Say your local phone book has everybody's name in it, okay? Including yours. Now let's take out the names of those other people. You know, the hemophiliacs, the prostitutes, the gays, the IV drug users. Is your name still in here? Are you feeling safe? Well, don't, because AIDS doesn't discriminate. You can find your friends, your family, even you. It doesn't care who you are or where you live. To AIDS, you're just another number.
If you'd like to make a call, please hang up.
Commercial, certainly a different vibe from doing the feature film. I know just from being on sets myself, you know, if you're with a director on a feature, you check with him, and if he's happy, then you continue on. If you're doing a commercial, there's kind of the agency to answer to. Do you enjoy that level of independence, of being able just to kind of go on your own, or do you feel kind of left out there? And do you feel more pressure because it is just you making that decision on set?
No. Again, as I said earlier, when I was doing advertising, I felt like I was part of a team trying to tell a story.
You never took an adversarial approach?
I tried not to. I mean, there were times where you just, not that I took the approach, but you were just in a mix of, unlike personalities, and it just was hard to get your rhythm. So it felt adversarial, but it's not because my ego was bigger than their ego. It was a lot of times I just wasn't finding sync with those people. Right. But I also feel like when you're doing a feature, you're on a team of people trying to tell a story, whether it's me and Tim Guinea and Elizabeth Reeser in Sweetland. I mean, I would never say I'm done if they felt like there was something else they had to explore. So I think there's a lot of consultation all the time when it's a collaborative art, Yeah. And I think there are a lot of directors who like to it's good for their ego to say, I've said, and so now we're moving on. I think it's efficient to have one person answering, but I think it's also good to be very collaborative and sort of, I think some people called me a following leader, sort of like a border collie. I got behind and steer the whole group in the right direction, kind of herd them all in the right direction. And yeah, I sort of have an idea that the right direction is that way, but I got a bunch of other people that have opinions, and we'll find that it's sort of in that direction. And so it's more efficient on a feature. It's a lot more efficient on a feature, but I think you just build that inefficiency into your day when you've got, and one time I shot the A1 steak bottle coming down on the table, when the steak is done thing.
Yeah.
There were probably 50 people in suits standing over me, and they all had an opinion about the lighting and the label and the thing, and you're like, well, this is their job,
Yeah, they're just protecting something.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the building up to Sweetland. It was 16 years in the making?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, people get the message that, this poor guy was,
before the internet.
It was before a lot of things, yeah. But, during that time, I directed most of those 856 TV commercials. I raised 3 fabulous children. I coached probably 856 Little League games. So my life was very full, and I was constantly taking my free time to explore how to raise money for a film, how to write a successful script, how to get that script in the hands of actors, how to write a script that would attract actors, because ultimately that's what makes a film tick, I think. It helps you raise the money and it helps you. So there was a lot of stuff going on in those 16 years, but I first read the short story by Will Weaver in 1990 in the Minneapolis Star and Tribune Picture Magazine, the Sunday supplement, and loved it, optioned it. I think I optioned it a little bit later because I think Channel 2 already had the rights to it and let it lapse after a year or two, and somebody in Jonathan Lazier's office called me and said, the rights are free if you want them. And so I picked them up in maybe 92, 93, I don't really remember. So it's been that long. It was, it's probably a decade of owning the rights and writing a screenplay. And I think the biggest thing that happened for me during that time was getting into the Cygnus Emerging Filmmakers Institute in LA, which was run by John Voight and Luke Perry, Gil Bellows, Lenny Von Dolen, a fabulous young group of actors who wanted to do kind of a Sundance workshop thing of their own. And I learned so much about storytelling from a story perspective, not an advertising perspective. I learned so much about writing. I learned a lot about what makes Hollywood tick. And I think that was 99. So from the time I optioned the story until 1999, I didn't realize that I had a very non-commercial project. I thought it was a very commercial project. How do people know these things? But I got out there and I started to realize what Hollywood storytelling is and what the opposite of Hollywood storytelling is. And I realized that's why this is so hard. It's because it's an anti-commercial film,
There's no cute kid in the foreground to sell a hamburger.
There's no, the script literally reads, Olaf looks at Inga, period, Inga looks at Olaf, period. And producers would read it and say, what the hell is going on in this story, And actors would read it and see this tremendous emotional power that could happen in it, which, I always saw, and it carried me through it, and I always believed that once we got this film in front of an audience, it would be overtly commercial, and I think it's proven to be that. But on the page and without a film under my belt, it was a tough sell. It was a really tough sell. So that was the biggest thing, was learning that and then adjusting my business approach to getting the money together. And that's what took so long.
Well, cool. Let's take a look at a clip from the making of the film.
Well, the word history to me is his story. It's so clearly that it's not about facts and figures, it's about memory, it's about the language that allows you to have that memory.
I are luckily and glad different.
Different kinds of happy.
It's really about Lars remembering a story that was told to him 30 years ago, that was told about a time 50 years prior to that.
I know this.
Quiet, please.
Okay, here we go, guys. Are you ready? Settle in for a blocking rehearse. And roll sound, please.
Rolling. Settle. We got 10. Action. That's a cut.
It's an exceptional story, and I was just blown away by it the first time I read it. Thought it was lovely, very simple, very beautiful.
There's a sort of a tenderness and a quietness to the writing that, to me, felt far more European than the American scripts that I'd been reading.
There are no cars that are blowing up, and no, about 90% of what you get to act in, there are aliens landing and people shooting people, and you feel like none of it has any impact on your life or relates to anything.
So it's not strange that that actor said, yeah, let me in.
Are you from Snowsa? Snowsa?
Ja, Inga, Snowsa.
You are from Snowsa?
Ja, Snowsa. Inga.
You are here.
Ja.
Hello.
Hallo.
Hello.
Hallo, Inge.
Well, Alan Cumming came on very, very early, and I think he he loved the character because it was written for him. I had met him just as I was starting to write, and the whole character of Franzen came out of my dinner with him. And I never said that to him, but he may have seen that in that. He may have seen his potential to bring that character to life.
It's locked. I know.
Franzen is this kind of, he's, you know, originally from Norway, and but he's sort of very settled in Minnesota now. He's a farmer. He's not a very good farmer, so luckily I didn't have to have too many farming skills.
Inga, bigger, better, faster way to farm. Bigger, better, faster.
Bigger, better, faster.
That's right.
Bigger, better, faster way to farm. Alan Cumming was just great in that.
I'm glad you liked him. Some people thought, you know, it should have been a big-handed, potato-faced Scandinavian.
I think it fits with the fact that he's not a very good farmer.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It kind of suits him. We only have a couple more minutes here, but I want to talk about casting. I know that some of the parts weren't nailed down until right before you got going.
That's the life of an independent film. I mean, my friend Alan Cumming, who I had known for a decade, and I wrote this part for him, he signed on fairly early and became a producer. But other than that, I mean, he was really the only one. The other people, you get the money at the last minute, you hold out hoping that, you know, I don't know what the producers were hoping, that Gwyneth Paltrow was going to come and do it or something like that. And so, you know, by the time you get to the open casting stage to fill these roles the way I feel like they should be filled, you're pretty close to production. And I thought that was a horrific place to be, but now that I'm sort of out on the circuit and meeting other filmmakers, that's just the way an independent film works. And that's the way you end up with people like Elizabeth Reeser, because you're open to it and they're available because you shoot in 10 days and they know they've got nothing else on the books, you know?
So you really feel that the script was the magnet that brought this talent, or did you have a magnet talent that...
I think this actors liked the script, but I can't speak to that because I'm not an actor and I wrote the script. But I think that Alan says that, and I think that Alex Kingston says that. I know Ned Beatty says that. And they all sort of came along. You know, Alan was the first one, and Ned came because of Alan, and John Hurd came because of Ned, and Alex Kingston came because of Alan. And so I think that's a good way to do it, is sort of anchor your casting with somebody like that who, you know, Alan was known for the anniversary party at that point as a guy who could produce and get it done. So he brought a lot of those people just by his reputation.
Terrific. We're going to talk more about Sweetland on the second part of our show. That's all the time we have right now. I want to thank you for coming by. Yeah. If you have an idea for a show or a comment on the show, you can catch up with us on the web at www.buttercity.com. Thanks.
Support for Butter City is provided by